Hey guys, Tarke Cat here. Sorry for the delay in between Battle Brothers episodes. Basically, what happened is I pre-recorded 4 hours worth of videos because I knew that I had a couple of days of hospital time. And when I went to upload those all those videos onto YouTube, I realized my OBS had bugged out and everything had recorded with absolutely no audio whatsoever. And by the time I realized, I didn't have the time to do anything about it. So in this episode, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and recap everything that you've sort of missed. And it's a real shame as well because it was the start of our endgame crisis. We're in the Noble War. We've been taking on a bunch of really difficult challenges. We haven't had any deaths. And they've been like really intense, taking on fights of 30 plus noble houses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recap through some of the more important battles, talk about sort of my thought process approaching each one, and then at the end we'll show off some of the loot we've gotten. I apologize about that, and we will then just go forward as normal in the following episodes. So this was the sort of start of the Noble War. In the episode before that, this was us just doing a final sweep of the map, trying to collect a bunch of nets, and we went on a massive net sweep, and I think that has been crucial to my success. So basically, throughout this episode, you can see we've got quite a few nets, and I'm like, okay, I know that the Noble War is going to start around day 80-ish, so what I want to do is I want to stockpile as many nets as possible from all the harbour towns. The reason being is when the Noble War starts, you ally with like one house, and then you end up battling all the other houses. So I was like, okay, I want to get as many nets as I can. I want to make sure that I'm allying with a faction with access to a harbor, so I can keep purchasing nets, and then get as many tools, and basically just get as prepared as I can for like 20 days of really long battles. I also made a point of rolling on a bunch of recruits and going to like taxidermists, and this is basically what you're seeing here is just lots of little micro me seeing, okay, have we rolled any decent recruits, taking a couple of easy fights, and this is the event saying, hearken, war is upon us. So yeah, that was the first episode. We took a couple of just easy brigand fights, a couple of undead fights along the way. This was a particularly long fight. As you can see, there's nothing particularly dangerous here. It's just like some low tier raiders. There's a brigand leader, this dude, and whatever. Because it was a swamp and because they were fortified, this actually ended up dragging on for quite some time. But we got through it safely, taking minimal damage, and it was just like a nice chunk of XP. So we got a few things, nothing too crazy, and we just did a couple of last minute scouting out the maps, kind of preparing and making sure that we were visiting all the towns along the coastlines, and just sort of, as you can see, heading towards coastal towns, get all the nets. So, once we'd done all of that and the war's officially underway, we decided to ally with the green faction, which if I jump back into Battle Brothers really quick, you can see they have two ports. They've got Blankenstad and they've got Albach. I decided to go for them as my priority because they've got ports, so they have two ports, and they've got one port which easily reaches the like northern faction, and then one port which kind of reaches this southern faction, and also has port access to a southern city-state. So I basically wanted something which had me ports, so I could get as many nets as possible, but also gave me the most mobility throughout the map. And that kind of makes sense. So our first mission was to go to this army camp and start raiding the local town. So we do a little bit of admin, we do some camping, and we had to take on some caravans. And this is kind of like the first of our, well, this was literally the first of our Noble War battles. So generally when you're taking these battles, this is a pretty good representation of the kind of troops you'll be seeing. You'll see a lot of these dudes with a mix of swords, picks, sometimes maces, as you can see here, and then a bunch of kite shields with, you know, decent medium tier armor. Basically, they're just very annoying and they kind of get in the way. You'll then have a sergeant who will be wearing light heavy armor, so sort of like 200-ish armor. You'll have a sergeant sash who has very high resolve, and they generally have cleavers. You'll get some billmen. They'll be the main kind of threats early on because billmans do a lot of damage. You'll have arbalisters. This is a tier 3 crossbow. If this connects with your head, that is a lot of damage. And then you get some pikes. In the harder fights, you'll then also be getting Swinehanders, which are basically just like big, scary two-handed sword units. You get a couple of hedge knights here and there. And then you'll get standard bearers, who are basically your banner dude, but they can double span rally every turn. So for these battles, my priorities are always to first scout out if there's any favorable terrain that I can take, and focus down on the reach weapons and the crossbows, lock up the shield guys with my tanky units, and then focus down sergeants, rallymen, and stuff like that. So pretty easy engage. You can see I moved up, so I got this bit of high ground here. We had these trees here blocking terrain, and these battles are mostly about just making sure you're controlling the engages. We make quite good use of rotate on our banner unit, using nets on priority targets where need be. And our bow character, we've just thrown a bunch of heavy throwing weapons on him. He doesn't even have throwing spec or duelist or anything. And it's just throwing weapons and using utilities like nets, fire pots, such like that. This was a pretty easy battle. I actually chose to use a fire pot, even though this was a pretty easy battle, just because I had like a perfect place to use it, and I realized that using it here would save me a bunch of armor damage and health damage, and I knew that I'd have a long series of attacks ahead. So that was a pretty easy cleanup. You can see we took some very minor damage, but no injuries and nothing serious, and that was kind of that. So that was sort of the end of the first episode. So the next episode, we had just finished this trading caravan, but there was then another trading caravan, and then a company immediately afterwards. So we basically went from one battle straight into another. So we then jumped into a 23-man battle, and this kind of just shows how these fights kind of progress. This time, the main threats were these 3 polehammer users. Very scary. Fortunately, other than these guys, there wasn't actually that much of a threat. They had 2 crossbow units, but they weren't like the top tier crossbow units. These are just like a bunch of fodder units who came from the caravan. And this was, again, mostly a case of like, okay, looking where can we get good terrain? We have these bushes here. We can make some funnels. So I reposition up. I have a shield unit here. We've got people sorted here. And because you're always significantly outnumbered in these fights, it's about making sure that you're picking the correct terrain, the correct engages, and making sure that you're basically leveraging... You just making sure you don't get flanked, right? That's the main thing, is like controlling your backline, making sure you've got movement. Having someone with rotate is very helpful here, or having smoke bombs. Having someone on the top and bottom with access to nets. So by having a shield unit in the middle, I can control this middle. I have my tankiest units on the far flank. They can control their flanks. We then have nets, which can control here. Nets control here, and my banner also has nets. So it's just making sure we have a lot of control. Mostly netting. If I see someone with armor I want to dagger down, I net him. So for example, here we wanted to net down the sergeant. Otherwise, using nets on anyone who could potentially do a lot of damage. So in this case, we see the pole hammers. And the other really good thing about controlling the terrain like this is it means that even though they significantly outnumber you, a lot of their units will waste turns moving. So like you've got a guy down here just like moving around. You've got people back here just moving. And by the time they engage you, you've hopefully then defeated 4 or 5 troops. So instead of it being a 12 versus 20 battle, it's actually like a 12 versus 15 battle. And also, when possible, making sure that you can prioritize getting the bannermen down so that they can't spam rally, because again, making sure that you're getting good use of your resolve checks and getting enemies fleeing is really crucial to these fights. So you can see we just continue to control the fight. You can see how I'm talking about with having people coming up the tops and the bottom, not really doing stuff. And it was just a case of clearing it up. Whenever anyone looked like it's getting slightly dangerous, moving my banner position and rotating them out. This was generally a pretty clean, very well-controlled battle. And also, one thing I should have mentioned is before the Noble War started, I stockpiled as many dogs as possible, because even though you often end up losing the dogs when you do this, it's really helpful being like, okay, I'm just going to drop a dog here to lock this unit down for several turns. It can be a really great way of interrupting crossbow units when you're like trying to just hold a good bit of terrain, and just, yeah, controlling the fight, taking things on your own terms, and also I made quite heavy use of my mace units stunning priority targets as we needed. So the way this quest works, it's got like 4 or 5 stages. You need to keep clearing out noble attacks, camping to the next day. I actually used this opportunity because my inventory was very full to run to this city, Eisenberg, before coming back, and managed to do it just for the timings. That was also another thing which was quite attractive about taking this seed, is we have access to like the closest friendly city or like village or whatever you want to call it to the north is in fact a city, so we get good sell prices here. And we also have access to a temple here through the ports, so that it was basically a case of knowing that not only to have good access to the north and the south, but also had good selling places and access to taverns. Temples, so I could heal up. We also have access to a taxidermist in the middle, which is pretty favorable. And then this has a kennel, so again, it's place stockpiling dogs. And then this place is mostly just to give us access to this city down here, which also has access to good selling prices, armorers, weaponsmiths, and alchemists if we need to stockpile on like fire pots or smoke pots. But yeah, anyway. So we did a big sell. So you can see we've got loads and loads of nets. I've also been, the fights I think have been easy. These 3 units here, these were basically guys who are like leveling up, swapping them in, trying to get XP when I can, and just making sure that we have a good like roster to rotate through troops so that whenever someone is getting a little bit damaged, we're swapping them out. So this is me just doing some inventory management. We then camp up and we wait for the next big battle. So the next big battle is this, and this was a very, very large battle. And this was me with my allies versus 30. So there was 2 very big challenges to this fight. One, there's a lot of them and had a lot of scary units. They also had 2 hedge knights. They had 1 hedge knight here. We really wanted his armor. There was another hedge knight up here, which you'll see in a second if I... there's the other one there with the bardiche. They had a lot of crossbow units. And the main issue that I had was like, okay, so I'm like, I want to dagger down these 2 hedge knights. I want their heavy armors. Most of my Battleforge units are in like 200 to 250 gear. This is like 300 plus gear. I want that stuff. Now, the problem is that I've got all of my allied units who will just beat up indiscriminately, and they don't care about me daggering down units. And also, my allied units have crossbows, and they will very happily shoot into your own troops. So what I decided to do was to take this one bit of high ground here, and purposely hold for several turns to have it so that my allies were taking the brunt of the incoming damage. So you'll see nearly all of the actual engages are happening on dogs that I was using to delay enemies. Also, they dropped a bunch of dogs on us, so those are actually the enemy's dogs, and my dogs came in later. But yeah, most of the actual combat wasn't happening on my troops, and my troops, because nearly all of them have either ranged weapons or quick hand reach weapons, I'm using my range control. And you can actually see that I've purposely positioned one of my tank units down here, and your job is to lock down this hedge knight, and then I was letting none of my units engage on their hedge knight, and my plan was hopefully the hedge knight is just going to solo all of those troops. I'm going to hold back. I'm going to watch out. The bardiche has a 2-line attack, so you could hit here and here. So I made a point of not having my guys in range of that, and having most of our forces on the bottom controlling this main central group of enemies. So as you can see, this is just the fight kind of progressing along, me sort of like holding back, letting these engages happen, letting the main sort of fodder units kind of just like beat each other up. And then this is them getting beaten up along the top. And now I'm starting to be like, okay, I want to control this hedge knight. So as I said, I had my main tanky fank unit lock him down. I threw a reinforced net on him. I had my banner in the middle because he has rotate, so he could move people up and down this line. And I had my shielded unit here who can stun because he has a mace in the middle. Again, just to really control the fight. The other thing which was really good here is I purposely held back so the hedge knight would drop off the high ground. So when it eventually came to daggering him down, I would have the high ground advantage on him. I then kept my gunner in the middle so he can get them just the most devastating damage. He was getting a lot of really good shots. These guys all just like fell down to him. And then a good chunk of people in the middle who were quite tanky, because I didn't want to have all of my forces down here and then let the top get out of control. So this kind of continues along. Again, purposely not damaging the hedge knight. I actually had my banner down here to rotate out whenever a knight engaged on him, rotate him out. And we managed to end up control the fight pretty well. This continues on for some time. And then, as you can see, I've kind of kept all of my units just out of range while this guy is just mushing through the allies. And you can see that by the end of the fight, there are actually very few of these allied units left, because I've let them basically do all of the tanking, and I basically had them just control this hedge knight the entire fight. So he's been no threat to me, and he's been taking very minimal armor damage. So at the end of it, my big friendly knight, Sir Lambert, he dropped, and it was just these few remaining footmen left. In the bottom, we've got a little dagger party happening, and we're daggering down this hedge knight. We eventually get him down. And now I've repositioned my shielded unit up here with a stick to keep this guy stunned, as I'm starting to get full surround on him, stunning him while doing minimal armor damage with a wooden stick, and also stunning him so he's not just like destroying my troops the whole time we're going through this. So this is now just me repositioning. This is the final bits of the battle. This went on for quite some time as I'm daggering down, rotating out their units, making sure they're not damaging my lovely armor. They did end up doing a fair bit of damage to it, unfortunately, but we did come out of this battle with some quite good equipment out of it. So if we skip ahead just a little bit, we did get one great helm and one scale mail chest. So unfortunately, we didn't get both great helms and both chests, but we got one complete set of armor, so I was very happy with that. And that all just came from really controlling the fight, being careful with it. And we also got a whole bunch of these helms, which are 200 Battleforge helms, which only weigh 12, so they're very good equipment pieces. The rest of this fight is basically me just handling some level ups, mostly just prioritizing the usual, taking the good defense rolls, taking the good attack rolls, and then balancing our life, fatigue, and resolve. I'll show perks and everything at the end. I can show you what my full roster is looking like. We did a big sell, and we finally bought our scout retinue, and I also bought my car upgrade so that I could be taking more battles without always running out of inventory space. So in the next episode, we then finished that. We were doing a big section of selling, and I did a bunch of selling at the city. It wasn't the best price, it was decent. And then I went over to the harbour to treat any wounds I had at the temple, buy more nets, see if I had any more missions, and kind of just scout around. Which is exactly what I do here. So I do a big unload. If it looks like I'm really broke, it's because I spent something like 25,000 gold on the car upgrade and the retinue. And I was also, as I said, constantly buying, 30 dogs at a time. One thing which is actually really lucky is I got this event as I was traveling across the road, and we got a decorated full helm. It was very damaged. It only had like 1% durability or something, but that is a 320 helm, which also looks very cool. So I was very happy about that. We happened to get an easy cart fight, so I thought may as well take it. We took it, and we got some pretty good supplies. Now, I actually made a massive mistake here because it's very hot in the UK at the moment, and I was recording this late at night because I was just trying to like bash out as many recordings as I could before I had the hospital the next day. And I misread the quest. I thought I took another fight against the northern cities, when actually I took a fight against the southern cities. So I wasted a lot of time going up north. I took a bunch of fights to the north, and by the time I realized my mistake, I'd actually lost like 2 or 3 days in travel, which is really unfortunate because it got me into the position I'm in now, where I'm basically fighting the clock and I don't actually have enough time to finish this quest, sadly. But anyway, we did get a couple of good battles through this. You can see we took one really big battle against the Northern House. Again, this is another like 29 one. This was just a whole bunch of shield units, whole bunch of Billmans, and you can see here I'm positioning like, okay, so we've got these tiles here. We want to make the most use of this. And just making sure that they're not letting them get good surrounds on us. Main priority targets are once again the bill hooks, the standard bearers, and then the arbalists, with heavy use of netting whenever I feel like a good net opportunity presents itself. And yeah, by having these bushes, it just stops getting too many surrounds. So if you look here, this is our tankiest unit in our heaviest armor, and he can only have 3 people on him. So that's only a surround bonus of 3, and he has underdog. We then have this guy here with a shield, who can only get attacked in 2 positions. We purposely left this little gap here. This is my standard bearer. I didn't need the banner here, so I just shoved another shield on him. And again, he's holding these 2 positions. He has nets, he has rotate. And then all of these guys, this is my second tankiest unit. Again, he can only get attacked in 3 spots because of where we've positioned him. And all these melee units, they're not actually really getting to do much. And while they're getting into position, we're just taking guys out. We're breaking them, bashing up their armor, getting morale checks, and just controlling the fight. So you can see they have to do a whole bunch of like circling around the top. While they're doing that circling around the top, they're not really doing anything. We're using dogs to hold positions. And yeah, the fight's actually going really well. So this continues on. We're getting a whole bunch of breaks. As you can see, we're just controlling things, just making really good use of the gunner. I wish I had a second gunner set up at this point. Having a second gunner would have absolutely like just face rolled all of these battles. Because that's the other really good thing about this, is we're making very heavy clumps of enemies. So whenever we're using our guns, we're getting at least 4 or 5 targets with every attack. So this is just continuing around. Again, moving our units as and when needed. Making use of nets as and when needed. For either like we want your armor, or actually for this guy, he wasn't a threat at all, so I'm like, I'm just gonna net you, just control that spot, and I can just ignore you. That was basically the thought process there. And we just go through it. We took a little bit of chip damage, but generally speaking, came out this with no real significant harm, and this is us just chasing people down. So as you can see, it's basically like our nimble units, their armor got pretty beat up. Our Battleforge units took very minor damage. And then we did actually take 2 injuries on both of our 0-stam units in the backline. So we kind of patched them up a little bit, and we're chilling. So from that, this is then... we just happened to stumble into a brigand fight. I only took it because it had a brigand leader. And I was like, I may as well take it for the sake of the brigand leader. This was actually quite a funny battle. So I was like, oh, dude, we've got a perfect choke here and a perfect choke here. Let's go. And they're like, no. We have a perfect choke here and a perfect choke here. There's also a choke at the top. So we ended up just going through it very slowly, very safe, took like no damage. Or like no meaningful damage. Took lots of like superficial hits, but like nothing of actual any real threat. And it was a good opportunity for us to get some XP on some of our low-level units. So at this point, I'm just kind of like repositioning people's gear, making sure everyone's got the correct armor equipped. And getting ready to start taking these big fights down in the south. Again, this is me just checking everything. You see, we've got a whole bunch of nets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 17 in inventory. And then keep in mind that we have 3 units with bags and belts with at least 2 to 3 nets. So that's 17, 19. You had 3, 22, 24. So 24 nets. Very, very strong here. You can see, make sure we've got nets and fire pots and all the appropriate dudes. Here we took another big noble fight, so 25 units. Save this guy to the end to dagger him down, want your equipment. And we had this guy at the bottom who was very scary, the Zweihander unit, who's just like, okay, so you're all very threatening. We also really want your helmet, because that is a 170 or 120 helmet. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, sorry. And we were like, okay, we can definitely make the good use of this terrain. This is excellent for us. We can use this terrain. This sets up a perfect fire pot scenario, which is exactly what I did. And it was a situation of just like getting as much damage as possible, getting down this threat as quickly as we could, using dogs to hold back these units, and just making sure that we're maintaining a solid line, with rotate units and tanky units that we can swap in and out, heavy use of nets. And making sure that we had our gun in an elevated position so we could get really good attacks across. So this fight went on for quite some time. I was throwing random nets just on units here to just stop them from engaging on our guys. Fortunately, it meant that they spent a lot of time just not really doing much. They spent a lot of time just like moving around. And whenever I was in a position to, making sure to really nail those bill hooks and these stand bearers. So this kind of continues on like this. It goes on and on and on. Again, you can see here that just like how good the gunners are. So we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. focusing down the banners, and I also netted the Zweihander just to lower his very high melee attack and melee defense to make him less of a threat and easier to get down. Continues along using dogs. Those are their dog, but using my dogs here and here, just going to control this flank and control these units. This was actually a really touch and go position we had here. We had this sergeant. Sergeants have pretty high melee defense. For whatever reason, we had like 3 or 4 turns of just missing, and him with the war pick was just nailing every single shot on our guy. So he very quickly melted all of our armor here. And I'm like, oh god, this is like my tankiest unit. So like I want him to stay alive because he's got really good gear. So he's a good unit, but also he has my heaviest armor. He's got my best equipment on. We cannot lose you. So at this point, it's not too dire, but it's time to get dire in the following turns. So my priority was to get my banner unit well out of the way and position him up here and rotate this guy out. And this kind of kept dragging on while controlling this bottom bit. And it continues on like this. Again, just controlling the flanks. You can see we've just been focusing through onto the bill hooks. You can see we've mostly just been ignoring the shielded units. They're not very threatening. They spend most of their turns shield walling and just attacking once. Because they're using a shield, they haven't got the double grip bonus. And when you net like half of them, sometimes not even attacking at all because they're trying to break out of nets. So basically just ignoring the ones which aren't threats. When I am choosing to focusing down the ones that can stun my units, that's more threatening than a guy with like a sword. And this is when things are starting to get a little bit messy up top here. So you can see I've got the banner in position. And one of the issues I had is I had the banner in position, but I didn't actually have the fatigue to rotate out. So we had a really tense couple of turns of like, oh god, we need to survive just one more time. And I just kept like missing every hit. And it was getting like really, really sketchy. And we had everything down here. You can see that I had, once again, I got my guy with the shield and the stick to just lock down their knights. And finally, thankfully, I eventually got to rotate this guy out, and he was exceptionally low. And I just kind of let the battle play for a little bit. And it was just a case of like, okay, just taking hits, control, and just being like, okay, let's just keep going. You can see he had only 49 life with 34 armor left. So he was like pretty trashed at that point. A couple of unlucky hits and he would have been gone. And then it's like, right, give you a reach weapon and just kind of control everything down. So in this battle, we kind of burnt through a lot of our armor. It was just from a case of taking just a series of very large fights back to back and a couple of pretty unlucky turns. Since so many of these guys have war picks, they really do just burn through your Battleforge units. And that's why it's important to have a mix of both Battleforge and Nimble units, because Nimble are better on some fights, Battleforge are better on others. So by having a mix, you can really be like, oh, that guy's got a war pick. I'm going to try and engage him with my Nimble unit and let my Battleforge unit, engage on the guy with like a cleaver, for example. But, we managed to control the rest of this fight. And then we are just like slowly daggering that guy down. And that's sort of just how it kind of progresses along through there. And we managed to get so I had a 160 hat, 160 hat for 7. We got the 320 hat for 21. So that's 2 320 hats we have now. Whole bunch of bill hooks, whole bunch of gear that we can sell, some light Battleforge gear, and these 215 hats are great as well. It's just like another like base bit of gear for our Battleforge units. And as far as I'm aware, that I believe takes me up to where we currently are. Is that correct? Yes, that was me just doing a failed intro. So with all of that out of the way, let's quickly recap sort of what's what. So we are left with, at the end of all of that, you can see that we went through 5 or 6 nets during that battle. So quite a few. You can see how beat up a lot of our armor is. We're like having to repair a bunch of stuff up. Pairing up this other decorated full helm. Very excited for that. So I hand shove on our nimble dudes. Got a very pretty 320 decorated helm on this guy. You very low in reserve, healing up, repairing up your armor, repairing up your hit points. Falk got pretty beat up. Unfortunately, got a cut artery, which is a pretty nasty wound to be taking on Nimble unit. And then everyone else is just like, they're just like a little bit beat, a little bit battered, just taking a little bit of chip damage here and there. And that kind of takes up to where we currently are. So at this point, we have a couple of things we need to think about. So we've only got 2 days remaining. Keep in mind we're about to hit midday to take on a battle here, a battle here, a battle here, and then somehow also get all the way back to Blankenstein. So it's basically not going to happen. So where I was at, I was thinking I'll probably take one, maybe two battles, and then use that time to visit a temple, heal up, repair, so that for the next mission, we can take the next mission in the best possible position, because there's no point basically risking our brothers, getting them into a really bad situation, taking these fights to not fulfill the contract, and then being completely out of commission, not able to take any more battles afterwards. So that is the grand recap. I will quickly do a recap of what perks and such I've taken, so people have asked for that. And the next episode will continue as normal, and I am very sorry that we had to do it this way. I was so upset when I realized that all those episodes are recorded with no audio. Very, very frustrating. So here you can see 41 melee defense, excellent, really strong. And we've just got him on the left flank, holding things down. If there was anything I would change about this guy, I would kind of like steel brow on him. He ended up high rolling quite a few melee skill rolls. At 78, I feel okay not going sword spec on him. We took sword spec, I believe, at level 9 because he was just like rolling ones every time. And then he then got like 3 threes in a row. It's like, oh, you're actually like 80 plus. It's kind of like you can use whatever you want. Anything under 80 is kind of rough. Here, this is our highest attack unit. It's our Zero Stam, who's just like axing it up. He's got just enough fatigue left over that he can take an injury but always move and attack once per turn. We gave him Fearsome, gave him Steel Brow, and he's kind of like a pseudo tank. Shame his melee defense didn't get any higher than that. But you get veteran levels. Every level past level 11, you get to put 1 point in everything. It's just a case of just going up the melee defense, up the attack, up the resolve. Here we have another guy. So it's like when I get units who've only got like 70-ish attack, if they've got a lot of fatigue, I turn them into a mace unit. They're excellent for controlling fights. And I always equip them as such. I give them the pole mace so that they can stun at reach. Give them just a normal two-handed mace. This is just the best I have currently. And then I give them a wooden stick so that I can drop them on a target to lock it down to like stun down hedge knights, for example. Here we have our Nimble. I called him a temp bro because 5 or 6 episodes ago he did get a permanent injury which lowered his resolve and his initiative, which really sucked because it meant we had to spend perk points on Fortified Mind and give him a trophy necklace just to get him up to 43 resolve. And that initiative hit really killed his dodge, which was a big part of what we want to do. This guy do dodge, like overwhelm things, but he's got good enough stats as is that you're like a good enough guy, give you a great axe, you hit things, and because of your injury, you're a very good person to be like, if I'm going to put anyone in a bad position, we put this guy in the bad position. And that's what I was talking about earlier about like, you know, prioritizing who on your roster is valuable, who can you afford to lose, and making sure that when there's a situation where you might be risking someone, you're putting in the less value targets into that position. Here we have our like next best unit. He's got really good life, really good melee defense, loads of fatigue, just like fountains of it, and he just kind of like holds the line, just batters people up. Looking back on this guy, probably should have just gone nimble with him with the amount of life and everything he had. But, you know, with the amount of melee defense as well, he's been really solid, really tanky. Because he has so much life, we don't need to worry about taking Steel Brow or anything on him. And yeah, been very happy with how he's been performing. This guy I've not been the biggest fan of. We were very excited when we first hired him many episodes ago, and because he had Determined, I'm like, oh, this guy could be really good. He had very high base starting melee skill with no stars, and I was like, if you get a couple of good rolls, you could be really good. And he just proceeded to roll terribly every time. So we're like, okay, you have decent initiative though, so we're just gonna make you a nimble unit. We'll give you a sword lance. And this guy's very nice against like weaker fodder units, like AoEing down zombies, getting some overwhelm stacks. But this is someone who again isn't particularly valuable, so that's why we have them on this outside flank here. Then next level we would take reach advantage, just make them a little bit tankier. Here we have a Battleforge guy in training. He's actually got good stats because of this pierced arm muscle. It looks like his muscle isn't that great. Just training him up. He's just at level 8. This will be a pretty good unit. Melee defense will be a little bit on the low side, unfortunately, but he could potentially higher roll a few times. But he will have very good melee attack, and will be just like another solid quick hands reach unit. Real MVP of everything. Wish I'd built 2 gunners instead of this bow dude. Should have just gone double gunner. But anyway, yeah, he's been carrying us through everything, getting us loads of resolve checks, getting us loads of overwhelm specs. I've been quite enjoying this whole like bags and belts net thing. This guy hasn't been using the nets as much because you're primarily just like reload shooting every turn. We've been giving him double guns so that he can get like a guaranteed double volley at the start of fights, which has been impactful. But for this guy, you probably don't need the bags and belts. This has been actually a really good spec. I've actually been really happy with this dude. We give him 1 shield just so he can stand in positions when need be. And then we give him 3 nets. And all of his perks are just around utility and tankiness. So you can see that we've gotten the resolve as high as possible for rallying. Giving him rotate, giving him bags, quick hands, so you're doing stuff of some use. Give you pathfinder, so you can be moving around the battlefield without building up too much fatigue. If anything, it would be really nice having recover on this guy. So it'd be maybe even dropping polearm mastery. Sometimes, you know, if I get an attack which is like, because you got a bunch of strand, it's like 60% plus, I'll take it. And he's actually gotten a fair few kills, to be fair to him. So you can see he's got 70 kills in 107 battles. But yeah, no, I've actually been very pleased with this guy for what could have very easily been a very poor unit. This guy has been doing very well. Wish we hadn't gone bow mastery, but is what it is. Has been actually really valuable throwing nets and with the throwing weapons. Being good vibes. This has been our spare banner, which we've been subbing in and out so we've been injured. And is just, we took a bunch of melee damage on him. We knew we were never going to take melee defense. We pumped the resolve as high as possible. Your job is just to exist. Aid in rallying when you fail your rally checks. And yeah, you're not a priority at all. You just kind of like exist to exist. This is someone we're leveling up. Really excited for this guy. Really nice melee defense, triple stars. Level 6, he's got 70 attack, which when you compare to these guys who are like level 12, only 74, this should be a really nice unit to add to the team once he's gotten a couple more levels, once he's gotten Battleforge. And it's just like slightly out of the danger zone right now. You know, with only 76 attack, it's kind of like, ooh, something like a stiff breeze in the wrong direction, something bad could happen to you. And actually, I'm just realizing we should probably change his hat. Do we have any of these not battered up? Yes. Change that to a slightly better one. And then, yeah, we've got our 0 stam unit with all the injuries. So, minus damage inflicted, lowered melee skill. You're really not up to much right now. Our nimble guy that we said. And then you could be good with levels. We have to see. These guys are very whatever. And then this unit we've just been holding on to because there is an event from the boa background that lets you craft a masterwork bow. But that's basically that. So I hope this has been a interesting-ish approach. I do apologize. Let me know if you enjoyed this recap style, and potentially whenever there's like a dull period, if either something goes wrong with the recording, or I'm like, actually, those just have been 4 very easy fights, or like 4 very easy episodes of just like easy fights, I can kind of like do recap episodes kind of like this. But anyway, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Oh, and finally, sorry, I won't be doing double uploads. I'll be doing single uploads for the next couple of days because I am also in the hostel quite a lot over the coming weeks. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.